Hey everyone, Selwyn here from winstrength.com, bringing you the final day of the third week of the Darkhorse Training program written by Brian Alsruhe. We're actually wrapping up the first phase of the program, and just like usual, I'll leave links below for the YouTube video where Brian Alsruhe explains his training program, as well as the LiftVault website where they put an awesome free spreadsheet that helps you dissect the program and actually do the program yourself and save yourself some time and hassle there. So we'll get down to it. Today was the last day, so we're wrapping up with upper body pushing and pulling with the focus on obviously push pressing and bench pressing. Again, with the warm-ups, nothing spectacular. We just did some minute of rowing, push-ups, pull-ups, get the blood flowing, try and target the areas you want. So rowing's a nice full body movement. Then we do some push-ups and pull-ups because that's kind of replicating what we're doing except with slightly lighter weights. From there, I'll move on to more specific warm-ups where, because the main movements for today were chin-ups and push presses, I'll actually do lower reps of chin-ups and then some push pressing with the empty, always starting off with the empty bar. That's just my habit. I think it's a good way to warm the muscles up, make sure you're not feeling anything with that light of a bar, because generally if you feel something with that light of a bar, most likely you'll feel something when the bar gets heavy. So give it there, start there, and then work your way up in weights to see what happens. Anyway, from there, today was max effort session. The full superset went weighted chin-ups, push pressing, ab wheel rollouts, and then some sandbag throws. The ab wheel rollouts and sandbag throws are a little variation from what is prescribed in the program, just because I can't do dragon flags and I don't have sand medicine balls that I can slam. I only have a sandbag. So that being said, little alteration there, no big deal, because really the point of those two last movements is to just engage the core and then do some conditioning work so that you can increase that GPP that they have, which is another great feature of the program. So we did six sets of that. We targeted 5 to 8 weighted chin-ups, and then we were doing heavy singles today for the push pressing, and follow that with some ab wheels. I shot for 10 but only got 8, and then sandbag throws just did sets of 6 across. I like an even number because I am going back and forth. But starting off with the chin-ups, just like usual, we did some lower weights with some heavy reps, so 45 pounds for 5s. You probably say I'm cheating towards the end there because I'm not quite getting my chin over the bar. I'm kind of getting maybe nose height with the barbell, with the pull-up bar, but hey, working that 45-pound weight, trying to get the weight up rather than the reps up, because last week it was higher reps, lower weights. So I like to, when given the chance to do 5 to 8s, I like to err on the side of 5s, just to get a bigger contrast between what we're doing last time when we were doing like 8 to 12s. Move the rep scheme to totally different, so you are getting different training stimuluses there. Part of the feature of the program. Again, if you watch the video, you'll understand a bit more as to why we're doing this, but it is a way to temper the stress by playing around with the sets, reps, and movement patterns there. But what was really cool today, we did the push pressing, work our way up from 195, 205, 215, and I hit a new PR. So the push press was kind of cool, 225 pounds. That's probably the first time I've actually held 225 pounds overhead, regardless of how I got it up there. Obviously the push press, a lot more easier than the strict press because we are getting some leg drive, but nevertheless it's still cool that I'm able to hold that weight overhead even as for a split second. We did that twice today, so that felt really cool. Again, never done that before. Hopefully this translates over to my strict press so that we can ramp that weight up as well. With the push press, kind of a cool movement there. Again, I think it helps train your core and your glutes. It does help with the form follow through for the strict press, because if you don't have the tight abs and the tight glutes, the movement, it's hard to push that weight up there because you're losing there's a lot of energy leak in the movement, simply because when you drive up with the legs, if your glutes and abs aren't engaged properly, you're gonna arch the back a little bit more, and that the force transfer from the feet and the leg drive won't exactly transfer up, and it'll be a lot harder to lock that weight out. As well as we're training a little bit of an overarching feature for the strict press, because then now we can lock out we can feel what it feels like to have 225 locked out overhead. So a couple of benefits there with the push press. Again, it's just another tool in the toolkit, so use it as you see fit. I quite enjoy it, so we'll move on from there. Now I move on to the volume set. For this one, I did drop down the weighted chin-ups to 25 pounds, and we just did sets of 8. So we increase the reps and decrease the weight just so we can get that through. And with the push pressing, we dropped the weight down to 185 pounds. Target sets for today was 5, so we hit 7 reps of that first opening AMRAP set. And we just did the rest with the ab wheels and the sandbag. There was nothing special there with the abs and conditioning. What did happen today, unfortunately, was I was just so tired. Again, the intensity of this program is like, I think it's catching up to me pretty harshly because I didn't finish the rest of the workout. That's where I ended it there. Instead of doing the 3 sets, I just got the 2 sets, and I was already, I believe, like an hour and 20 minutes into this workout, and I hadn't even finished volume effort for today. So I'm thinking I'm just gonna call it because I'm dragging this workout. It's just dragging out too long, and it's already an hour and a half. I don't want to spend another 30 minutes in here to get the rest of the workout completed. And it just goes, I think that's just testament to how intense the workout can be, especially when we ramp up towards the end of the week. So the week 1, obviously, for most programs is going to be a nice light introduction to the program, figure out what weights you need to use. Second week's going to start ramping up, and the third week's really going to be where you're starting to push the limits, actually engaging in the program a little bit more. Especially with this style of training, it's a lot more condensed than a lot of the other programs that I've done. Actually, all the programs I've done, none of them have the amount of work condensed down into the amount of time that they're doing here. So we're doing a lot of movements in ideally under an hour and a half, which does help drive up that conditioning. It means we don't have to do separate conditioning days. But with that being said, today was very brutal. The final week, the final day of the first phase, wrapping up there, I couldn't quite finish the workout, so we did miss out on dynamic bench press and the last set of volume. I'm probably leaving. I'm not attacking the program as I should with that intensity, and I think I am not doing the program justice by incompleting the program. But again, at just days like today, you really do need to listen to your body, especially when you have time constraints. I didn't want to spend 2 hours in the gym today. It's not what I needed to do, so had to call it short there. Unfortunate, but I think in the long run it's fine, obviously, because what you do today doesn't really matter. It's what you do over every day for the next 10 years. That being said, still enjoying the program. I am looking forward to the week off. That's going to be great. Probably not going to do anything quite as intense as this. If anything, I might just work out twice a week for that deload week, just in order to get everything settled down and really recover and attack the second phase with as much as I can. Wrapping up week 4, I did want to wrap up my explanation of the program. So we focused on what conjugate style training is on day 1, what maximum effort is, what volume is, and now we're going to move on to the final piece of the puzzle, which is dynamic effort. This is kind of unique to the conjugate west side style training, where we want to focus on speed work. Actually, I'll lie, I don't know if it's unique to it, but it is popularized. It has been popularized by the west side training system and conjugate, everything that flows on with that. Having dynamic effort work is kind of the centerpiece to the conjugate style training that we're doing here. And I think it is helpful to a degree. I don't think it's necessary for you. It depends on the sport. If you're a competitive athlete, if you're an athlete in something that requires explosive strength, you play rugby, you're a sprinter, literally anything that requires speed, then yes, you probably need to do some dynamic effort training just to work on developing that muscle fiber type. But if your athletic endeavors don't involve that, so if you're a power lifter where you're moving heavy weights but you don't care how fast you move them as long as you move the weight, then I don't know if it really lends itself to helping you as much as it would help other athletes in other fields. But nevertheless, let's explain what it is. Basically, you want to move the weight as quickly as possible. It's kind of in the name, dynamic. We're moving quickly, you know how it goes. But we do want to worry about the weight percentages we use. So this is where percentage of weights really come in handy, and this is where you're really dialing in the specificity of which level of weight you need to use to make this achievable. So we generally want to stay well under our 1 rep max range. We're looking at kind of 50 to 60% of our 1 rep max range. And the reason for this is when we start getting heavier, we're losing speed, And by losing speed, we're defeating the purpose of dynamic effort. And really what we're doing here is driving up that explosive nature of the body. We're trying to train how to teach the body and train the body to move more explosively and quickly. Because everyone wants to move quicker at some point in life. It's a lot better to move faster than it is to move slower for the most part. I'll make that a generalized statement. Faster is better. So there are a couple of benefits to using dynamic effort work. With the Darkhorse training program, we train competitive style lifts. So our competition style lifts are where we train that dynamic effort movement. Rather than using low bar squat, competition style bench press, conventional deadlift with max effort work, we're training them with dynamic effort work. So what we can do is increase our exposure to those lifts. Well, actually, we can still continue to do those lifts while reducing the wear and tear on that movement pattern. So if you're experiencing pain with your low bar back squat in the shoulders or the elbows, especially when the weights get heavy, it really beats up the joints. But if we're able to dial down that weight to 50 to 60% of our 1 rep maxes, now the joint issues aren't really there. They won't really show up as much, and we reduce the likelihood of an overuse injury while still maintaining our exposure to that lift, as well as teaching us how to move explosively in that lift specifically. So yes, if you're a power lifter, might not help as much because we're moving heavy weight slowly. But if you can still think about moving that weight as fast and aggressively as you can, that's going to have a lot of benefit to you lifting a heavy weight very slowly. I know that when I get aggressive with a lift, it makes the weight feel lighter. So that's why you kind of have those amp up times and stuff. And when it gets really heavy, it's just that mental framework. You're trying to increase the amount of energy you have and that aggression you have. So training that will have some follow through, but not as much as just lifting heavy weights, because strength is specific. But by increasing our exposure, what's great with lifting lighter weights is generally with a 50% weight, our technique is going to be pretty spot on. Like, we're not experiencing form breakdowns at light weights. And if you are, just stop increasing the weights, really focus on your technique, because at the end of the day, technique is probably the king of everything you should be doing here. Yes, when the weights get heavy, technique breaks down, but when the weights are light, really focus on dialing your technique. This is where we can really become a technician in how to execute these lifts. And by driving up the speed work and the dynamic work with light weights, we can really focus in and make sure that every rep that we do is as close to perfect as we possibly can get it. That way, when the weights get heavy and when we are fatigued, we can revert back to a lower level of training. Like most people say, we don't rise to the occasion. We generally fall back to our lowest standard of training. So if we can really practice and get reps in at as close to 100% technical expertise as possible, then that's going to be great for when we're tired, we're not thinking correctly, we're mentally fatigued, we're physically fatigued, we're in a competition, there's a lot of stress. We can default to executing the movement pattern as we have done many, many, many times before. Well, I would argue, you can disagree with me here, but I would argue that dynamic effort method is probably closer to an intermediate method of training. I would say the beginners don't really need to worry about doing a dynamic effort method. They probably just have to focus on executing technical efficiency with maximum effort work and volume effort work, because that's where we're going to drive our first beginner gains. Dynamic effort probably isn't that important to a beginner because we're not trying to increase that specificity to explosiveness. We're really just driving up initial strength gains. And if we're practicing our technique, then we're always going to be practicing that technique as a beginner. As an intermediate, we're going to be dialing in certain things. We've figured out what our weak points are, what our misgrooves are in the lift, and that's where we can really help with dynamic effort, really dial in that technique during those lighter weights. So where do you start with a dynamic effort method? One of the recommendations would be to start at 50% of your 1 rep max, videotape yourself, and when you keep adding weight until the barbell starts to slow down, and that's where you stop adding weight. That's how to gauge whether you're really training dynamic effort, because if we add too much weight, once we start going from 50 up to say 75%, we start venturing into maximum effort or even volume effort work, because now we're doing repeated reps for repeated sets at a slower rate. So we're really doing volume effort or max effort, depending on what you're doing there. But we're definitely veering out of that dynamic effort method because we're not executing the lift with as fast of a speed as we can. This obviously has to be balanced with the fact that it's not always going to move quickly to the visual eye, but that's more of an advanced notion where you can move a heavy weight with a fast mindset. So that's something to keep in mind when you move down the line of your training age. But if you're an intermediate, I would say stick to weights that you can actually move fast. And once the weight starts to move slower, like from your replays and looking back at it, don't increase the weight after that. Actually dial back the weight until that bar speed moves back to where it was beforehand. That way you're really training that dynamic, really training that explosive speed and that explosive strength that we want out of this dynamic effort method. I got it. So this concept of applying maximum force, imagine you can squat 600 pounds. When we deload to 300 pounds, you want to exert the same amount of force you would put into a 600 pound weight into that 300 pounds. So we're really driving up as fast as we can, trying to engage every single muscle that we have in order to lift that weight up. And this is where we kind of venture into using bands and chains in order to increase that accommodating resistance. So this is kind of a different piece to dynamic effort work, but a nice supplement to it. Because dynamic effort doesn't require you to have accommodating resistance, where we increasing the amount of weight or tension on the barbell as we get closer to lockout. It's really you moving the barbell as fast as you can. What can help with that is having accommodating resistance. And all accommodating resistance is that as you perform the lift, the perceived weight gets heavier as you lift the weight up. So let's take a squat, for example. We're going to put bands on that barbell. As we squat down, obviously an elastic band shortens and there's going to be less tension. As we stand up, we're going to increase the length of the elastic band, and it's going to increase the amount of weight that is getting pushed back down onto us. So if you try to squat with a really slow speed, you're going to find it incredibly difficult to stand back up, especially if it's towards the limit of what you can handle. So what it's training you to do is to stand up quicker so that you can overcome the resistance of that elastic band. And the reason we're adding weight toward the top is because generally for most movements, there's something called a strength curve, and the strength curve is basically how much force you need to output to move that weight. So at the bottom of a lift, so at the bottom of a squat when I'm in the hole, that's probably the hardest point of the lift. But as I stand up, there's more muscles that get engaged and more the way the body moves, it makes the weight easier to stand up with. So I can, when I'm almost standing up, I'm probably going to stand up, because when I'm an inch away from locking out at the top of a squat, that's probably one of the easiest parts of the lift. It's definitely easier than when I'm at the bottom coming out of the hole. So this is why you can quarter squat a lot more than you can full squat, because of that strength curve. So what we're trying to do with the accommodating resistance is add more weight as the weight gets easier to move. So as we stand up, we're getting more and more muscle mass behind it. We're getting easier to stand up. We're actually wanting to drive up. We're going to drive up the amount of resistance that's getting pushed back down on us, which makes it more difficult to stand up. And that's kind of a basic overview about accommodating resistance. And that's how it ties into dynamic effort method, is because you want to still stand up with a lot of speed. And if you're wanting to add more weight to the top of it so you're not jumping, we're going to drive up, we're going to put some bands, put some chains on there. So at the top of the lift, it's quite heavy relative to at the bottom of the lift. So just make sure that the band tension is minimal when you're at the bottom of whatever lift you're trying to do. So continue with the squats, make sure the band tension is very low at the bottom, if not deloaded completely. And as you stand up, you're pretty much close to maximum elastic tension, or all the chains are off the ground. That's how those two tie in. Again, chains and bands aren't necessary for dynamic effort method, but they do make it easy to execute because you have some extra thing to push out of, and it's just another tool in the toolkit like usual. Nothing is good, nothing is bad. We're just using different things to accomplish different goals. So that kind of wraps up my little overview of the conjugate style method. Very, very basic overview for people that want to get started into it. Obviously, check out the Westside Barbell website. Elite FTS does this a lot too. They have nice articles and great books that you can read, educate yourself on. That way it opens up another tool for you to use with your own training. We don't have to stick to linear progression, we don't have to stick to block periodization. We can start conjugate training we can throw in these concepts when we're in the off season or even during the season. With the training, we can do a lot of different things there, which allow us to advance ourselves and better ourselves as athletes. So I'll leave a link to the playlist here like usual, so you can catch up with my progress for the Darkhorse Training program. And again, it'll update as I move through the program. Probably won't post anything there during the off week, but again, we'll have 9 weeks worth of videos there, so we have 3-week blocks. And again, this has been Selwyn from Wynn Strength. And remember, a better life through strength.